The battlefield was silent except for the faint crackle of burning metal. Smoke rose into the sky, covering the stars above. Among the ruins, broken ships and shattered walls, a young alien girl lay on the cold ground, her lower body paralyzed. Her people had left her behind, calling her useless, calling her broken. She remembered their words as clearly as the fire around her. You cannot walk, you cannot fight, you cannot serve, you are nothing, they said, and then they turned away, leaving her in the dust of war. Her name was Kayla, and she was only 17 by her people's measure. Once, she had dreamed of flying in the sky with the soldiers of her race, but fate had been cruel. An explosion months ago had taken away her legs, leaving her trapped in her own body. Now, in the middle of this battlefield, she could only crawl a little, dragging herself inch by inch. Her arms trembled from weakness. Her voice cracked when she cried out. No one answered. No one cared. She pressed her back against the broken wall of a destroyed bunker. Her breathing was shallow, her silver eyes wide with fear. All around her, shadows moved in the smoke. Alien soldiers her own kind walked past. Without looking, some even spat near her as they passed, muttering that she should have died already. Her heart sank deeper every time. Why live when even your own people throw you away? For hours, Kayla lay there, half hidden in the ruins. Her stomach ached with hunger. Her throat burned from thirst, but worse than the pain was the loneliness. She whispered to herself, I do not want to die here. Not like this. Her tears mixed with the dirt on her cheeks. The wind blew cold, and she shivered. Every sound of footsteps made her tense, hoping it was someone kind, but always it was not. Then came a sound she did not expect, not the heavy boots of her people, but lighter steps, cautious, slow. She turned her head and froze. Through the smoke, a figure appeared, broad-shouldered, tall, carrying something that glinted in the firelight. It was not one of her kind. It was a human. Kayla's first reaction was fear. Her people had always spoken of humans as dangerous, stubborn, even savage. The wars between their species had taken countless lives. She had heard the stories of human cruelty, of their endless will to fight, and now one stood only a few steps away. His face streaked with dirt and blood. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp, searching, alive. The human stopped when he saw her. For a long moment, he said nothing, only watching her with suspicion. Kayla held her breath, afraid he might kill her after all. Why not? She was his enemy, a paralyzed alien girl lying helpless in the ruins. Yet something strange happened. Instead of raising his weapon, the human lowered it. His gaze softened. You, he said quietly, his voice rough but not cruel. You're still alive. Kayla blinked, unsure if she understood his words right. Her language was not his, but something in his tone reached her heart. She shook her head weakly, her voice barely a whisper. Why? Why do you care? The human crouched beside her, close enough that she could see the scars across his hands. He looked at her legs, motionless and weak, then back into her eyes. For a moment, Kayla thought she saw pity, maybe even respect. You're hurt, he said, pointing to her legs. She looked away, ashamed. I am broken, she whispered. My people left me. I am nothing. The human frowned, shaking his head slowly. His voice was firm. No one is nothing. Those words pierced deeper than any blade. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not since the accident. Her own kind had seen her as dead weight, but this human, her enemy, spoke as if she still mattered. Her heart raced, not out of fear this time, but from something unfamiliar, hope. The sound of marching footsteps echoed nearby. The human's head snapped up, his body tense. Enemy patrols were moving close, searching the ruins. He glanced at Kayla, then at the path behind him. He had two choices: leave her here to be found, or take her with him. His jaw tightened, his eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, Kayla realized he was making a choice that would change both their lives. He bent down, sliding his arms under her fragile body. Kayla gasped, shocked as he lifted her with ease. Her arms wrapped around his neck instinctively. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her, strong and alive. The human whispered only one word before moving into the smoke: hold. For the first time since her accident, Kayla felt something other than despair. She felt the warmth of being carried, the weight of being protected, and though fear still filled her chest, she could not stop the thought rising inside her. Maybe, just maybe, she was not left behind after all. The night was darker than Kayla had ever seen. The smoke from burning ships covered the stars, leaving only a pale moon to guide the way. The human carried her on his back, moving quickly but carefully through the ruins. His steps were steady, though she could feel the weight of exhaustion in his muscles every time he stumbled. Her heart jumped, but he never let her fall. Kayla's thoughts spun like broken glass inside her mind. Why was he helping her? Why would a human risk his life? For an alien enemy who could not even walk, her people would never do such a thing. Not for someone weak, not for someone broken, she whispered against his shoulder, her voice trembling. Why are you carrying me? The human did not answer at first. His breathing was heavy, his eyes scanning the shadows for danger. Finally, he spoke, low and rough, because you're alive. Kayla blinked in shock, the words simple yet powerful. Alive, she thought, not useless, not forgotten, but alive. Behind them, the sound of marching grew louder. Alien soldiers were patrolling the ruins, searching for survivors. The human pressed himself against a collapsed wall, holding Kayla close as the patrol passed. She could hear their voices in her own language, cruel and sharp. They left the cripple here, let the fire finish her, one said. Her chest tightened as shame and pain burned inside her. She had been nothing more than a burden even to her own kind. The human's grip on her arms tightened, as if he understood without needing translation. He waited until the patrol was gone, then slipped into the darkness once more. Step after step, he carried her across broken ground, past shattered machines, and through rivers of ash. At last, they found shelter in the ruins of an old structure. Its roof half fallen, but its walls strong. The human lowered her gently to the floor, his movements careful. Kayla felt the cold stone under her hands, but for the first time in days, she felt safe. The human sat down against the wall, pulling a small pack from his shoulder. Inside were scraps of food and a half-empty water canteen. He offered them to her first. Pushing them gently into her hands, she stared at him, confused. You should eat, she whispered. You are the one carrying me. But he only shook his head. You need it more. Her fingers trembled as she ate, the food dry but filling. She had forgotten what it was like not to be hungry when she drank from the canteen. She closed her eyes, feeling the cool water wash down her throat. For the first time since her people abandoned her, she felt a flicker of strength. Her eyes lifted to the human, who watched the doorway with quiet focus, his weapon resting in his lap. He looked like a soldier who had carried the weight of war too long, and now he carried her too. Kayla hesitated, then spoke softly. I do not understand you, human. He glanced at her, his eyes tired but steady. What don't you understand? Why? She whispered, her voice breaking. Why risk your life for me? I am nothing to you. He was silent for a long time, the firelight from distant ruins flickering in his eyes. Finally, he said, because no one deserves to be left behind. The words struck her like thunder. Her people had abandoned her, without thought, but this human, her enemy, saw her worth. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust, but fear gnawed at her heart. What if I slow you down? What if they find us because of me? She asked. The human leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. Then we face it together, together. The word felt strange to her, like a gift she did not deserve. No one had spoken of her as part of together. For a long time, her lips trembled, but no sound came. Instead, she lowered her gaze, unsure how to answer. The night stretched on, filled with distant explosions and falling ash. Kayla drifted between sleep and waking, each time finding the human still there, still watching. He did not abandon her, even when silence pressed heavy between them. She realized something then. This was not pity. It was choice, a human's choice. When dawn touched the sky, pale and weak through the smoke, he stood again, without a word. He lifted her onto his back once more. Kayla clutched his shoulders, her silver eyes wide as she looked out at the ruined world. She felt fear, yes, but also something else she had not felt since before the accident, hope. And though she did not say it aloud, she thought it in her heart. If this human was willing to carry her through the ashes of war, then perhaps she was not as worthless as her people claimed. Perhaps her life still had meaning, and perhaps, for the first time, she was not walking toward death, but toward something greater. The ruined shelter was cold and silent. Cracks in the walls let the night air slip inside, brushing Kayla's skin like icy fingers. She lay against a broken beam while the human built a small fire. With scraps of wood, the flames glowed weak, but they gave warmth, and for a moment the endless darkness retreated. Kayla watched him closely, her silver eyes wide and uncertain. Every movement of his hands was careful, steady, like someone who had built fires 1,000 times before. She noticed the scars on his knuckles, the dirt smeared across his face, the tiredness in his shoulders. This human was no ordinary soldier, she thought. There was something heavier about him, as if he carried more than just the weight of his own survival. When he caught her staring, she looked away quickly. Her cheeks burned, though she did not understand why. He said nothing, only tore a strip of cloth from his sleeve and handed it to her. She blinked in confusion until he pointed to the shallow cut on her arm. She hesitated, then slowly wrapped the cloth around it, her hands trembling. No one had cared for her wounds in so long. The gesture felt unreal. Hours passed. The human spoke little, his eyes always shifting to the doorway, his ears alert to every sound outside. Kayla wanted to speak, wanted to ask him questions, but fear held her voice inside. Finally, she whispered, "What is your name?" The human glanced at her, silent for a moment, then answered, "Ethan." The name was strange on her tongue, but it felt strong, solid, like the man himself. She nodded slowly. "Ethan," she repeated, softly. For a long while, they sat in silence, the fire crackling faintly. Kayla gathered her courage, her voice shaking. "Ethan, why do you not hate me?" His eyes flicked to hers, a shadow crossing his face. "I've seen too much hate already," he said, his voice heavy. "It never leaves anything behind but graves." The words struck her deep, because she knew they were true. Her people had abandoned her with hate, not mercy. But this human spoke as though kindness could still survive in war. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "My people call me Kayla." The name hung between them, fragile, as if sharing it was giving away a piece of herself. Ethan gave a small nod, repeating it in his rough voice, "Kayla." For the first time in weeks, she felt like her name still belonged to her, not lost in the ashes of the battlefield. That night, Kayla could not sleep. Every sound outside made her tense. Every shadow on the walls made her heart race. She was not afraid of death anymore, but she was afraid of being left again. In the quiet, she asked him the question that weighed the heaviest. "When this war is over, will you leave me too?" The silence after her words felt endless. Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the fire, his jaw tight. Finally, he said, "I don't know what the war will take from me, but I won't leave you behind. Not while I breathe." Kayla's chest tightened, her throat aching. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust him, but trust was a fragile thing. Her people had broken it long ago, leaving her to rot. But this human spoke with a strength she could feel in her bones. Maybe, just maybe, he meant it. Suddenly, a noise outside shattered the fragile calm. Boots on stone, voices in the distance. Harsh and guttural. Ethan froze, pressing a finger to his lips, his eyes locking with hers. Kayla held her breath as the voices grew closer. Shadows moved across the doorway, long and sharp. Her body went rigid, fear crushing her chest. If they found her with a human, they would kill them both without hesitation. Ethan gripped his weapon, his face hard. Kayla wanted to scream, to beg him not to fight, but no sound came out. The footsteps stopped right outside. For a long moment, all she could hear was her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Then, slowly, the voices faded, the boots marching away into the distance. Kayla let out a shaky breath, her body trembling. She had never been so close to death, so close to losing the one person who had not abandoned her. Ethan lowered his weapon, but did not relax. His eyes scanned the doorway for a long time before turning back to her. "You see?" he whispered, his voice calm. "We made it through." Kayla nodded weakly, her hands still shaking. Her trust was fragile like glass, but in that moment, a small piece of it began to heal. Maybe this human was not just protecting her life. Maybe he was protecting something deeper, something she could not name yet. As the fire burned low, Kayla finally allowed her eyes to close, and for the first time since her people left her, she did not fall asleep afraid of being alone, because when she opened her eyes again, she knew Ethan would still be there, watching, guarding, choosing her. The morning sky was gray, heavy with smoke and ash. The ruins around them stretched like a graveyard of metal and stone. Ethan adjusted the straps of his pack, then lifted Kayla carefully onto his back once again. She winced at first, still unused to being carried, but her arms soon tightened around his shoulders. Her heart beat fast, not from fear of him anymore, but from the danger waiting outside. They moved quickly, staying low, slipping from shadow to shadow. Every corner felt like a trap, every broken wall seemed to hide eyes watching. Kayla's silver gaze scanned the ground ahead, her voice soft. "Where are we going?" Ethan did not slow, his tone firm. "Away from here, as far as I can get you." She swallowed, a strange warmth filling her chest. He said, "Get you, not get us." As if her safety was the only thing that mattered. But safety was not easy to find. The sound of engines rumbled in the distance. Alien patrol ships flew overhead, their searchlights cutting across the ruins like blades. Ethan pressed himself against a collapsed tower, Kayla clinging tightly to him as the light passed just inches away. She could feel his heart hammering beneath her arm, steady but fierce. When the patrol moved on, Ethan whispered, "We need to keep moving." The path ahead was worse. A wide street stretched before them, filled with wreckage and the bodies of those who had fallen. The air stank of smoke and iron. Kayla trembled, pressing her forehead against his shoulder, whispering, "If they see us, they will kill you." Ethan's voice was steady. "Then they will have to try." He stepped into the open, carrying her across the street with slow, careful strides. Halfway through, a sound cut the air, shouting. Kayla's head snapped up, her blood running cold. 3 alien soldiers had spotted them from the far end of the street, their weapons raised. Ethan cursed under his breath and broke into a sprint, his boots pounding against the cracked stone. Kayla gripped him tighter, her voice breaking. "They will catch us." But Ethan only growled, "Not if I can help it." Blaster fire cracked behind them, burning holes into the wreckage around them. Sparks flew as metal shattered. Dust filled the air. Kayla could hear the soldiers shouting orders, their steps pounding closer. Her body shook with fear, helpless in his arms. But Ethan never stopped moving, his breath harsh, his muscles straining. He dashed into an alleyway, twisting through rubble and broken walls. The soldiers gave chase, their voices echoing through the ruins. Ethan pressed himself against a wall, holding Kayla close as footsteps thundered past. They waited in silence, her breath caught in her throat. One soldier stopped, turning his head as if he had heard something. Kayla's heart nearly burst. Ethan placed his hand over her mouth gently, his eyes fierce, telling her without words, "Be still." The soldier lingered for a moment longer, then followed the others, the sound of their boots fading. Only when silence returned did Ethan finally move again. He carried her deeper into the ruins, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning for the next safe place. Kayla's voice shook as she whispered, Why do you fight so hard for me?" He did not look at her, only kept moving. "Because I made a choice." She frowned, her chest tightening. "A choice?" Ethan's voice was low, certain. "I chose not to let you die." The words echoed in her mind. No one had ever chosen her before, not after the accident. Her people had chosen to abandon her, to leave her in the dust, but this human carried her through fire and danger, not for gain, not for duty, but because he had chosen to. It made her heart ache in a way she did not understand. By the time they reached the edge of the ruins, night had begun to fall. They found an old tunnel, half buried under rubble, hidden enough to rest for a while. Ethan set her down carefully, his chest rising and falling heavily from the effort. Kayla looked at him, her voice soft. "You will die if you keep protecting me." He met her gaze, his eyes hard but warm. "Then I will die standing, not walking away." The silence after those words was heavy, but not empty. It was filled with something Kayla had not felt in so long: trust, fragile but growing. She leaned back against the wall, her body weak, Her spirit torn between fear and hope, Ethan sat nearby, his weapon in his lap, his eyes scanning the dark entrance of the tunnel. The firelight from the ruins flickered faintly against his face, carving shadows across his scarred features. In that moment, Kayla realized something powerful. She was not just being carried anymore. She was being saved, piece by piece, heart by heart. The journey out of the ruins took days. Each night they hid in broken shelters. Each day they moved further from the battlefield. Ethan carried Kayla through dust, through forests of twisted metal, and across rivers black with ash. Her body was weak, but her mind grew sharper. With every mile, she began to wonder where he was taking her. At last, one morning, Kayla saw something she had never imagined. The smoke of war faded behind them, and before her stretched green hills and living trees. The air smelled different here, fresher, filled with life instead of burning. Her silver eyes widened as she clung to Ethan's shoulders, whispering, This is not my world." He gave a small nod, his voice low. "No, this is Earth." Kayla's people had always spoken of Earth as a harsh place, full of violent humans. They said the planet was dangerous, scarred by endless wars, but the sight before her was nothing like those stories. The trees swayed softly in the wind, rivers sparkled with sunlight, and birds filled the air with song. She could not remember the last time she heard a sound that was not shouting or gunfire. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "It is beautiful." Ethan carried her through the forest until they reached a small clearing. There, hidden between the trees, stood a cabin made of wood and stone. It was old but strong, smoke curling gently from its chimney. Kayla's heart thudded. In her chest, this was no military base, no outpost of war. This was a home. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air smelled of wood and earth, warm and safe. Shelves lined the walls with books and tools. A table stood in the center, with 2 chairs, worn but steady. Kayla stared, her voice breaking. "You live here?" Ethan set her gently on the bed near the window, his answer simple, "Yes." She touched the blanket beneath her fingers, soft and rough at the same time. Her eyes moved to the window, where light streamed through the trees. It felt unreal. For so long, she had only known the cold stone of ruins and the dust of battlefields. Now, she was surrounded by warmth, by peace. Her throat tightened, and she whispered, You brought me to your home." Ethan knelt beside her, pulling a box from under the bed. Inside were simple supplies, bandages, herbs, old medicines. He began cleaning the cuts on her arms, wrapping them carefully. His touch was gentle, nothing like the rough hands of soldiers. Kayla blinked back tears she did not want him to see. No one had cared for her like this since before the accident. She had been a burden, a shadow. But here, she was being treated as someone worth saving. As he worked, she whispered, Why let me stay here?" Ethan's eyes lifted to hers, steady and unflinching. "Because everyone deserves a place to rest," he said, "even in war." The words sank deep into her heart. Her people would never have said that, never. To them, strength was everything, but to this human, kindness was strength. Days passed. Kayla learned the rhythm of the cabin, the crackle of fire in the mornings, the soft creak of wood in the nights. Ethan cooked simple meals, teaching her the names of human food. She listened carefully, repeating the words, sometimes clumsy, sometimes with a laugh she did not expect. The sound surprised her own. Laughter, fragile but real. It had been so long since she remembered what it felt like to laugh. Every moment built something new inside her, trust, fragile but growing. When Ethan sat by the fire sharpening his blade, she found herself watching him, not with fear, but with curiosity. When he showed her how to read a word in his language, she whispered it back, proud when he nodded. When he carried her outside to sit beneath the trees, she felt the sunlight warm her skin and thought, this is what living feels like. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in orange and gold, Kayla whispered, I was not supposed to see this. Ethan turned his head, frowning slightly. See what? She gestured weakly at the horizon, her silver eyes shining. This sky, this peace, this home. He was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, maybe you were supposed to, Kayla. Maybe that's why you're still alive. Her heart ached at his words. for the first time since her accident. She believed her life might still hold meaning, not as a soldier, not as a burden, but as Kayla. And though fear of the future still lingered, she felt something stronger growing inside her, hope, and something even deeper, love for the world she had just discovered. As night fell and the first stars appeared, Kayla lay on the bed, listening to the sound of fire crackling. Ethan sat nearby, his presence steady and quiet, and before she drifted into sleep, she whispered words she thought she would never say again. "Thank you for giving me a home." The cabin became more than shelter. It became a place where Kayla began to feel alive again. Each day, Ethan found new ways to help her grow stronger. He crafted a chair from spare wood and metal scraps, one that could roll on small wheels. When he placed her into it, Kayla gasped, her silver eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time since her accident, she was not lying on the ground, not helpless, but sitting tall. She moved her hands on the wheels, shaky at first, but then smoother. The chair creaked as it rolled across the wooden floor. Kayla laughed, an unsteady, broken laugh, but real. Her voice trembled as she whispered, I can move again." Ethan's lips curved into the faintest smile, his voice steady. "You were never truly broken, Kayla. You just needed another way to stand." That moment changed everything. Each day she practiced, rolling from one end of the cabin to the other. Sometimes she stumbled, sometimes she fell. But Ethan was always there, his hands steady, never letting her hit the ground. He taught her how to cook simple meals, showing her how to stir the pot, how to taste the food. The first time she spilled soup across the floor, she froze in shame, whispering, "I ruin everything." But Ethan only chuckled, cleaning it up with calm patience. "Then we'll ruin it together," he said. Kayla found herself laughing more often, sometimes so much her cheeks ached. She never thought she would laugh again, never thought she would see beauty in small things. But here, in this cabin with this human, even the sound of firewood crackling felt like music. Every day it was a step away from despair, and every night was proof she was not alone. But not all nights were peaceful. Sometimes Kayla woke to the sound of Ethan standing guard at the window, his weapon in hand, his shoulders tense, his eyes locked on the forest shadows. She whispered softly, "They are looking for us, aren't they?" He did not answer right away, but the silence was enough. Finally, he said, "War does not forget easily, Kayla, and neither do soldiers." Fear returned to her heart, but it was different now. Before, fear meant death, abandonment, and loneliness. Now, fear meant losing the one person who had given her hope. She whispered into the darkness, "If they find us, will you run?" Ethan turned his head, his eyes meeting hers, sharp but kind. "I don't run," he said. "Not from them, and not from you." Those words burned into her soul. She had been thrown away like nothing, but to him, she was worth standing for. She clutched the blanket against her chest, whispering, "Why? Why do you keep choosing me?" Ethan's jaw tightened, his gaze steady. "Because someone has to show you you're not alone, Kayla, and if no one else will, then I will." The next morning, she watched him repairing tools outside the cabin, the sun falling across his face. Her heart ached in a way she could not explain. She had thought humans were cruel. She had thought love and kindness were lies. But here was one human proving all of it wrong. She whispered to herself, "Maybe it is not my body that is broken. Maybe it was my faith." As days turned to weeks, their bond deepened. When she rolled across the cabin, Ethan would nod proudly, as though she had conquered the world. When she managed to slice vegetables without cutting herself, he clapped once, his voice firm. Good. She found herself waiting for his approval, craving it, not because she needed it, but because it felt like sunlight after endless storms. One evening, as rain poured outside and thunder shook the sky, Kayla sat by the fire while Ethan fixed her chair. She watched the way his hands moved, rough but gentle, steady even when tired. Her voice was soft when she asked, "Do you ever regret saving me?" He looked up, surprised by the question, then shook his head slowly. "Not once," he said. "The war took everything from me, Kayla, but bringing you here, it gave me something back." Her chest tightened, her breath shallow. No one had ever said her life gave anything back. She felt tears on her cheeks, hot and silent. She did not want him to see, but when he did, He only reached out, his rough hand brushing lightly against her face. His touch was gentle, not pity, not duty, but something far more human, something she had long believed did not exist for her. Love. That night, as the storm raged outside, Kayla lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind filled with fear of soldiers, fear of being taken, fear of losing him. But beneath it all was a stronger truth. For the first time in her life, she was not afraid of who she was, because someone had chosen her, not as a burden, not as an enemy, but as Kayla. And in the quiet darkness, she whispered a promise to herself. If they come for us, I will not let him stand alone. The forest was quiet that night. Too quiet. Ethan sat by the window of the cabin, his weapon across his lap. The fire inside burned low, casting long shadows across the wooden walls. Kayla lay on the bed, her silver eyes open, unable to sleep. She could feel that the silence was not peace, it was warning. Her heart beat faster as she whispered, "They are coming, aren't they?" Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside. "Yes," he said quietly, "they've found us." The words struck her like cold steel. All the warmth she had found in this home, all the laughter, all the healing, was now at risk. Kayla gripped the blanket with trembling hands, her voice shaking. "Run, take the forest paths, leave me." Ethan turned sharply, his gaze fierce. "I told you before, I don't leave people behind." Before she could answer, the sound came, boots against the wet ground, weapons clicking in the night. Shadows moved among the trees, lights cutting across the cabin walls. Her own people, armored and armed, closing in. Kayla's breath caught in her chest. If they saw her with a human, they would not just kill Ethan, they would call her traitor. But she knew the truth. She was no traitor, she was free. The first crash came as soldiers kicked in the cabin door. Ethan rose, weapon ready, his voice a growl, "Stay behind me." Blaster fire lit the room in red sparks, wood splintering, smoke filling the air. Kayla covered her head, fear surging. But through the fear she saw Ethan standing like an unbroken wall, alone against many, protecting her. Her chest ached. She could not let him fall, not now. Not after all he had given her. Something inside her mind stirred. Kayla's people had always spoken of her weakness, her broken body, her uselessness. But they had forgotten something: her mind, her will, her spirit, even paralyzed. She was not powerless. She saw the soldiers' weapons glowing, their armor wired with tech from her world. And she knew how to break it. Closing her eyes, she focused, her voice trembling but steady. The lights flickered, systems sparking, soldiers shouting in confusion. Ethan glanced back at her, shocked. "Kayla, what are you doing?" Her silver eyes blazed as she whispered, "What I should have done long ago, fight." The soldiers' rifles powered down, their visors darkening as her will crashed through their systems. One by one, they stumbled, their voices panicked. Ethan seized the chance, moving fast, striking with precision, forcing the last of them out the door. The cabin shook with noise, but within minutes it was over. The forest fell silent once more. Bodies scattered in the mud, the danger fading into the night. Ethan lowered his weapon, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He turned to her, his eyes wide with something between shock and pride. "You saved us," he said, his voice rough. Kayla sat trembling in her chair, her hands still buzzing with the strain. Tears streaked her face as she whispered, "No, we saved each other." Ethan crossed the room, kneeling before her, for the first time since they met. He looked at her not as someone he protected, but as an equal. His voice was quiet, but firm. "You're stronger than you think, Kayla." Her lips trembled, her heart racing. "Only because you showed me I was not nothing." The fire crackled softly, the storm outside fading. Kayla looked around the cabin, the home he had shared with her, the home he had given her. She had been abandoned, broken, forgotten. But here she had been found, healed, loved. Her people had left her to die, but a human had carried her, protected her, and reminded her that life was more than survival. She whispered into the quiet, "You gave me a home, Ethan, and you gave me love." Her hand reached for his, fragile but steady. "And now, no matter what comes, I will never leave your side." Outside, the stars broke through the clouds, shining down on the small cabin, and inside, two souls once enemies, once strangers sat together. No longer alone, the war might still rage beyond the forest. But in that moment, something greater had been won, not victory in battle, but victory of the heart. A fragile alien girl and a stubborn human, proving together that sometimes the strongest power in the universe is love.